I only learned how charming I was when the newspapers declared me dead by mistake, and my husband had already buried our marriage in secret. In 1891, Princess Marie Louise, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, married Prince Aribert of Anhalt at Windsor Castle, bound by duty and genuine hope. 9 years later, while she was thousands of miles away in Canada, a ducal decree annulled that marriage without her knowledge or her consent. She returned home to find herself erased, yet she never took off his ring. Not once, not for the next 56 years. What made those vows unbreakable began long before the wedding day. I was born at Cumberland Lodge on the 12th of August, 1872. My grandmother, Queen Victoria, called it welcome news in her journal. My mother, Helena, who the family called Dear Lenchen, had delivered a very large child, her fourth. From my first breath, I belonged to a world that measured every heartbeat against the pulse of royal expectation. I was a granddaughter of the Queen before I could speak, and that fact shaped the air I breathed. Cumberland Lodge was both home and royal outpost. My father, Prince Christian, served as Ranger of Windsor Great Park, so our household lived in a state of gentle readiness. The lodge's corridors echoed with the sounds of uniforms and silk, the scent of beeswax polish, and the constant possibility of the Queen's arrival. Carriages might roll up at any hour, and every room was kept in readiness for her sharp eyes. I grew up in the shadow of portraits, watched by ancestors whose stern faces seemed to whisper reminders of duty. My mother moved through these halls with quiet authority. She was Queen Victoria's third daughter, practical and kind, but unyielding when it came to matters of service and punctuality. She taught by example, her discipline woven into daily life, prayers said at the same hour, letters answered promptly, promises kept without fuss. My father, gentle and content in the Queen's orbit, was a steady presence, his loyalty expressed in small, consistent acts rather than grand gestures. Queen Victoria herself was both imposing and, in rare moments, unexpectedly gentle. She swept into our lives in black bombazine, her questions brisk, her gaze missing nothing. I remember her recounting my birth as if it were a matter of state, her hand warm around mine. She told me I had been a large child, with the faintest smile, and I was to remember always the weight of the blood I carried and the expectations that came with it. In this world, loyalty was absorbed rather than taught. It was there in the way my mother pressed her lips together when someone was late, in the silent glances exchanged across the dinner table, in the way the Queen's diary recorded each birth and loss. Promises were not casual. They were sacred, binding, as heavy as the keys to Windsor. To break faith, even in small things, was to let down not just family, but a line of ancestors and the nation itself. Yet childhood found its cracks. I lost shoes in the grass, climbed trees in petticoats, and asked questions that made governesses blush. Laughter slipped through the rules, but the ring of duty always closed again. I was never just a child. I was a princess, my life shaped by vows and ceremonies. The sense of being watched, by God, by the Queen, by history, was as constant as the ticking clock in the drawing room. Looking back, I see how those early years planted the seeds of my stubbornness. The hush of the lodge, the weight of unspoken promises, taught me that vows, whether whispered in a nursery or thundered from a throne, were not to be broken. They were as unyielding as the old oaks outside my window. When my time came to make vows of my own, I did so with a gravity that would outlast both joy and sorrow. Tradition and expectation shaped me. As a child, I wore a ring on a ribbon, a plaything at first, but later a symbol of all I had been raised to believe. In those early years, before the world grew complicated, I was simply Marie Louise, granddaughter, daughter, princess in training, learning that loyalty could be both comfort and chain. If I ever dreamed of happiness or romance, those dreams were always colored by the knowledge that duty would come first. It was the air I breathed, the ground beneath my feet. When I stood at the threshold of adulthood, I did so with hope and the quiet certainty that any vow I made would be for life. That was the only way I knew. The world outside Cumberland Lodge waited. So did he, though I could not yet imagine the shape of our story, or the strange, unbreakable hold a single ring would have on my hand and my heart for all the years to come. Berlin in November is a city of gaslight and polished boots, a place where even the laughter at royal weddings rings with the chill of duty. I was 18 when I first saw Prince Aribert of Anhalt, standing among the Prussian officers at Princess Victoria's wedding. He had a way of bowing that seemed both practiced and genuinely charming, a flicker of mischief in his eyes that caught me quite off guard. The room was full of uniforms and diamonds, but it was his voice, gentle, a touch too eager, that drew me in. Court whispers say that love at first sight is for poets, not princesses, but I confess I felt a kind of giddy hope, as if I'd slipped out of the shadow of my grandmother's expectations for just one evening. The weeks that followed moved with dizzying speed. The engagement was settled before the last wedding bouquet had faded, announced at my parents' silver anniversary with all the fanfare of a diplomatic victory. 4 weeks from first meeting to formal promise. Such was the tempo of royal matchmaking, where hearts were hurried along by the ticking of dynastic clocks. I remember the press calling it a fairy tale swift as the season, and for a moment, I let myself believe it. My mother's eyes lingered on me, searching for certainty. My father, gentle as ever, squeezed my hand and said nothing. It was enough. The wedding itself was a spectacle to rival any in Windsor's long memory. On the afternoon of the 6th of July, 1891, St. George's Chapel filled with the scent of lilies and the low murmur of titled guests. I wore creamy white satin, the gown heavy with Honiton lace, and the memory of my mother's own vows. Orange blossom and myrtle were woven into my hair, the ancient symbols of hope and constancy. My 6 bridesmaids trailed behind in a flurry of pale silks, their laughter a nervous counterpoint to the solemnity of the choir. The Queen sat in her accustomed place, black bombazine and diamond stars, her gaze as sharp as ever. When she nodded approval, the congregation seemed to breathe again. The newspapers called it a public fairy tale. They described the gleam of the carriages, the golden haze that fell across the chapel windows, the way Aribert's gloved hand rested on mine at the altar. I remember the ring, plain, gold, unremarkable to anyone but me, slipping onto my finger with a weight that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The vows were spoken in English and German, binding 2 houses, 2 nations, and supposedly 2 young hearts. I repeated the words with a certainty I had learned in childhood. Promises are not to be broken, not by me. Yet, beneath the music and the applause, there was a hush. In private letters, my relatives wrote of their doubts, gentle warnings folded into the margins, questions about our compatibility that I could not yet bear to read. But on that day, I was buoyed by the spectacle, by the hope that love might grow from such a beginning. The world watched and cheered, and I smiled until my cheeks ached, determined to make the fairy tale real, if only by force of will. The legalities were swift and final. The marriage contract was signed before the ink on the register had dried, witnessed by the highest in the land. My new title, Prince Aribert of Anhalt, was spoken for the first time as we left the chapel, the crowd outside roaring approval. For a fleeting moment, I felt myself lifted, as if the weight of expectation had turned to wings. But a ring is more than a circle of gold. It is a promise, solemn and binding, forged in hope and sealed in public view. I wore it that day with pride, believing it would anchor me in a new life. I could not know then how heavy it would become, nor how quickly the music of Windsor would be replaced by a silence that no amount of ceremony could fill. The carriage rolled away from the chapel, carrying me toward a future I could not yet see. I kept my eyes fixed on the horizon, heart full of hope, vows ringing in my ears. I did not look back. Not then. Dessau's palace offered no warmth, only routine. Each day began with the same sound, the shuffle of servants in the corridor, the distant chime of the clock, the faint clatter of breakfast being set on a silver tray. I was shown my rooms, my schedule, my seat at the table, as if these could replace welcome. The staff moved in a strict order, the chief lady-in-waiting always rigid, the chamberlain silent and exact, footmen gliding by, never meeting my eyes. Every gesture was noted, every meal a silent performance. Breakfast passed in quiet isolation. Lunch unfolded in courses, each bite watched by portraits of ancestors who had seen happier unions. Dinner stretched across a table so long that conversation felt impossible, the space between Aribert and me wide and cold. My days filled with obligations, audiences with local dignitaries, charitable visits with the Duchess, and daily promenades in the gardens. The schedule was set to the minute. At 10, a formal call. At noon, a bouquet presented by a minor official. At 3, a walk, always with the same lady-in-waiting who never strayed from the prescribed path. These were not invitations, but duties, as fixed as the ring on my finger. The palace's beauty was a kind of confinement. My footsteps echoed in marble halls that seemed to grow colder with each week. Passing a servant meant averted eyes and a silent bow, making me feel more invisible than if I had been alone. There was no laughter, no comfort, only the strict order of court life. My presence was endured, not welcomed. Years later, I wrote, I was not wanted, my presence was irksome to him, and we were two complete strangers living under the same roof. Aribert appeared only at the edges, a uniform glimpsed in a doorway, a voice in another room. More often he was away with his regiment or engaged in duties that excluded me. The staff treated his absence as routine. I filled the hours with embroidery, letters home, and reading the same pages again and again. The windows looked out over perfect lawns, but the view felt as distant as the sea, vast, unreachable, indifferent. Each morning, a servant drew back the curtains, breakfast was set, and the palace clock chimed. I slipped the ring onto my finger, a habit as automatic as breathing. It was meant to comfort, to signal belonging, but only reminded me of vows that bound me to a hollow life. The palace teemed with people, yet I was alone. The routine pressed in until I felt myself shrinking to fit its shape. I became a figure in a pageant, moving through the motions of a duchess, never allowed to be simply Marie Louise. In those empty corridors, silence grew heavy, and loneliness settled deeper with every ceremony. There is a particular cruelty in being invisible where one should belong. Each morning in Dessau, I performed the rituals of a duchess, greetings, receptions, the slow procession of official calls, while feeling the chill of exile within my own home. The palace was crowded with faces, but none of them looked at me as a companion. I was not wanted. My presence was irksome to him, and we were two complete strangers living under the same roof. Those words, once written in the privacy of my diary, still sting when I recall them. They are not the words of a young bride, but of someone forced to witness her own marriage unravel in silence. I have often wondered whether it is better to be openly rejected or quietly ignored. Aribert's absences became so frequent that the servants began to treat them as a matter of course. His life orbited around Berlin, his regiment, his friends, never me. I filled my hours with embroidery and letters home, pretending that duty alone could fill the aching spaces left by love withheld. The ring on my finger, which should have been a comfort, became a private reminder of vows I had taken seriously, even as the world around me treated them as little more than ceremony. It was not long before whispers began to circle, as they always do in royal households where silence breeds suspicion. I learned, sometimes by accident and sometimes by the deliberate carelessness of others, that there were rumors about Aribert, horrible vice they called it in the language of the time. The phrase passed from mouth to mouth, never quite reaching the light, yet impossible to ignore. There was talk of an incident with a male servant, though no one would say outright what had happened. No investigation, no scandal in the papers, only the heavy weight of gossip pressing down on all of us. Letters from my family urged discretion, and the German court closed ranks in the name of dignity. It was a lesson in how quickly rumor can become a weapon and how thoroughly a royal reputation can be protected when the truth is too dangerous to name. I will never know the whole story. Perhaps it is better that way. What I do know is that the silence grew unbearable. I began to feel as if I were dissolving into the wallpaper, a figure painted into the background of my own life. The loneliness was not just emotional, it was physical, a tightening in the chest, a coldness at the edges of every day. I clung to my routines, to the ring, to the hope that duty might yet redeem something from the wreckage. But the palace had become a gilded cage, and I was desperate for air. It was in that stifling atmosphere that the first hint of escape arrived, not as a promise, but as a necessity. The situation had become intolerable, as the family would later say in their letters. I did not yet know just how swiftly events would move, or how a single telegram could change the course of a life. I only knew that I could not go on as a stranger in my own marriage, watched by servants who knew too much and spoke too little. The ring remained on my finger, a silent witness to vows that no longer bound two hearts, but only one. In the spring of 1900, Canada offered a kind of distance that felt almost unreal. My name appeared on the official royal schedule that year, a small entry among the movements of the empire. The journey began in Halifax, where the fog clung to the harbor, and the city greeted me with a formality that masked a quiet curiosity. I had come for my health, or so the doctors claimed, but the real reason felt more complicated. My mother's gentle urging, a need for air, and perhaps a hope for something lighter than the weight I carried in Dessau. At Rideau Hall in Ottawa, Lord and Lady Minto welcomed me with practiced grace. Lady Minto's kindness was a balm, her questions few, her smile genuine. For a few weeks, I was not a duchess or a disappointment, but simply Marie Louise, a guest in a country still shaping its own identity. The Canadian Heritage Records list my visit among the official royal engagements of 1900, but those entries miss the sense of freedom I found wandering beneath unfamiliar maples, breathing air untouched by courtly expectation. In Montreal, the mayor's wife pressed a white rose into my hand and urged me to climb the mountain for its view. In Toronto, children at the hospital lined up to curtsy, their faces open and expectant. The schedule was relentless: teas, receptions, hospital visits, garden parties. Yet each event felt lighter than the rituals of home. Here, the only requirement was to be gracious, to smile, to accept bouquets and polite applause. Letters from Dessau arrived with a heaviness that cut through the Canadian spring. My marriage, once celebrated, had become a private sorrow, a silent ache I carried from city to city. Still, for a little while, I let myself imagine a life built on something simpler, something honest. I walked by the Ottawa River, the ring on my finger cold and unyielding, and wondered if freedom could ever last. The telegram had not yet come. For now, the sky was wide, the air sweet, and I let myself believe I might be free. The telegram arrived on a gray September morning, its envelope stiff, the handwriting precise and unfamiliar. The butler's knock was softer than usual as he handed me the cable. It came from Duke Frederick of Anhalt, my father-in-law, a man whose authority stretched across borders and whose will now reached into my life with chilling finality. The message was stripped of comfort. His Highness, the Duke of Anhalt, by the authority of the Anhalt House, hereby commands Her Highness Princess Marie Louise to return at once to England. The marriage is declared null and void, and all further correspondence on the matter shall be directed to the Royal Household of Great Britain. Delivered by His Royal Highness, the Grand Duke of Saxe-Weimar, the 14th of September, 1900. No explanation, no hint of regret, just the machinery of ducal power, grinding down the last of my resolve. I read it twice, my hand trembling, the ring on my finger suddenly heavy, a symbol now emptied by decree. Before I could gather myself, a second telegram arrived, this time from Windsor. The words were few, but the command was unmistakable. Tell my granddaughter to come home to me. V.R. My grandmother's will pressed through every letter. There was no comfort, only the certainty of royal command. Passage was arranged without delay. There was no time for farewells in Ottawa, no chance to thank the women whose quiet kindness had softened my exile. My return was no longer a matter of choice. I left for New York, boarded the ship with a suitcase and a heart full of questions. The crossing blurred past, salt air, sleepless nights, the ring still on my hand. I landed at Southampton in September 1900, greeted not by family, but by the silent weight of scandal. My fate had been decided in absentia. The telegrams had done their work. My marriage, my title, my place, all swept away by orders that offered neither comfort nor explanation. I clung to the ring, refusing to let go of the one thing that still felt binding. The decree arrived not as a letter, but as a blow, cold, official, and final. I remember the paper in my hand, the stiff foreign notepaper, the seal of Anhalt pressed deep into the fold. The words were not meant for comfort. They were written for the record, for the archives, for the convenience of men who wished their troubles tidied away by legal language and a signature. The date was set in ink, the 13th of December, 1900. I read it again and again, searching for some mistake, but the meaning was plain. By the authority of the Duke of Anhalt, my marriage was declared null and void. The phrase repeated with a formality that felt almost mocking. The decree cited intolerable circumstances. Das Eheleben sei für beide Teile unzumutbar. The marriage intolerable for both parties. There, in the language of Section 1314 of the Bürgerliches Gesetzbuch, my life was reduced to a legal inconvenience, a contract dissolved for one of harmony, or perhaps for one of courage. No one asked if I agreed. The decree spoke of non-consummation, of incompatibility, of circumstances too strained to endure. I was not summoned to defend myself, nor even to bear witness. The decision had been made in rooms I would never enter, by men whose faces I barely knew. My name, my vows, my future, all dispatched in a single sheet, delivered across an ocean. I was not a wife, not a duchess, not even a participant. I was an absence to be erased. I read the words slowly, my hands cold and unsteady. The marriage is declared null and void, and all further correspondence on the matter shall be directed to the royal household of Great Britain. So ended 9 years of duty, 9 years of silence. Not with a conversation, not with a reckoning, but with a decree. The ring on my finger, plain, gold, stubbornly bright, suddenly felt heavier than ever. I pressed my thumb against it, as if I might anchor myself to the promise it represented. My vows were solemn and binding. I had never thought to break them, even as the world around me conspired to make them meaningless. The language of the decree was precise, almost surgical. Intolerable circumstances. It sounded so reasonable, so bloodless, yet behind those words lay years of loneliness, of glances averted, of a marriage that was never truly begun. I had been irksome, unwanted, a stranger under my own roof, and now I was to be a stranger even to my own past. The law had spoken, and with it came a silence more complete than any I had known in Dessau. I folded the decree and placed it beside the telegrams. I did not weep. There was a peculiar relief in the clarity of it, a kind of liberation wrapped in humiliation. But the ache was sharp, as if the paper itself had edges. I was to return to England, to resume a life I had never chosen to leave, but I would do so changed, emptied, perhaps, but not erased. I looked at my hand, at the circle of gold that still marked me as a wife, and I resolved, then and there, that I would not let the law unmake what I had made sacred. Whatever others chose to forget, I would remember. The ring would remain, and so would I. The word chosen for my undoing was intolerable. How coldly efficient, how perfectly suited to the requirements of royal diplomacy. It appeared first in a private letter from Aribert to his father, then echoed in the decree that crossed the sea to find me. Not cruelty, not infidelity, not even sorrow, simply intolerable. I have often wondered whether that word was meant to spare feelings or simply to avoid explanation. It did neither. It cut with a peculiar precision, reducing 9 years of silence and ache to a single legal cipher. The machinery of annulment moved as quietly as a velvet curtain. There were no public accusations, no scenes, no trials. The British and German courts passed telegrams back and forth in a language of discretion, each side careful not to disturb the surface of royal respectability. The Duke of Anhalt issued his decree. The British Foreign Office acknowledged it with the faintest of nods. I was permitted to keep my style and rank, but the substance of my life was swept away with a stroke of the pen. Yet it was not only the men who orchestrated this erasure. My grandmother, Queen Victoria, gave her blessing in a note dated the 2nd of September, 1900. I have seen her handwriting, steady and unyielding. She wrote that it was advisable for our dear granddaughter to be freed from an unhappy bond, and that she would see to it that the matter was handled with discretion. There is a kind of mercy in those words, I suppose, but also a finality that left no room for protest. She was thinking of the crown, of the family, of the papers that must never print a whisper of scandal. I, meanwhile, was thinking of the ring still on my finger, the vows I had called solemn and binding, the private ache that no decree could annul. The telegrams were delivered not with ceremony, but with a hush. The staff at Windsor moved quietly, their eyes averted, as if the very air might betray a confidence. I was told when to appear, where to sign, which doors to use. The official statement released to the press spoke only of amicable dissolution and mutual regret. No mention of the word intolerable, though it echoed in every corridor. I absorbed these judgments in silence. There was no scene, no opportunity to defend myself, no invitation to speak my own truth. The decision had been made in rooms I would never enter, by people who believed they were sparing me, and themselves, the indignity of public shame. Perhaps they were right. Yet I cannot help but feel the weight of that secrecy even now, all these years later. To be erased so quietly is its own kind of humiliation. The ring remained. The vows, unbroken in my heart, became a quiet act of defiance. I would not let the word intolerable be the final word. If I could not keep my marriage, I could keep my promise. The silence of the palace was replaced by a silence of another kind. A hush, not of protocol, but of survival. I learned to wear it like a cloak and to let the world believe what it wished, while I clung to the only truth left to me, that I had loved, that I had endured, and that I would not be unmade by the discretion of others. The ring remains, a small, weighty promise upon my hand, outlasting the telegram that once told me, quite simply, I was not wanted. Still, I have kept my vow, though others have not. In a world eager to annul what is solemn and binding, I find a certain mischief in surviving, intolerable perhaps, but undefeated. Even now, two strangers may share a roof, but only one keeps the vow. Tell me, which would you rather be?